All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual talkback session, all about the Christmas Truce. My name is Miles Glancy, and I'm the Executive Director of the Santa Clara Chorale. I am delighted to be joined by our two panelists today. Firstly, we have my partner in crime as Artistic Director of the Santa Clara Chorale, and on faculty at SCU as their Director of Choral Activities, Dr. Scott Hanna-Weir is here. Scott, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Miles.
And also joining us today is the co-writer of City Lights Theater Company's Truce, A Christmas Wish from the Great War, and teaching professor of theater at Santa Clara University, Jeffrey Bracco. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Good to be here. Hi, everybody.
And thanks to all of you for joining today. I see some familiar faces of Santa Clara Chorale supporters. Thank you so much for being here and for your ongoing support. And we are also joined by some City Lights Theater Company subscribers. So welcome and great to meet you. I'm really delighted to have our two organizations come together in this way today. So thank you all for being here. We are here to talk about our upcoming projects happening in parallel with one another. City Lights is presenting its Truce play beginning this week, in fact, with previews beginning Thursday and opening night on Saturday evening, running through December 22nd at their space in San Jose. And then Santa Clara Chorale will perform its Christmas Truce concerts on December 13th and 15th at Mission Santa Clara. So Scott and Jeff, I'll kind of get you started, and then I have all the trust in you that you can feel free to take the reins from me. But since we have two groups of folks joining us today, how about we just start with a brief introduction of who you are and how you found yourself in Santa Clara and your connection with the respective organizations, and then we can start to talk about the projects at hand. So Scott, why don't you start us off?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Miles. I came to Santa Clara in 2013 to join the faculty and serve as the director of choral activities. And at the same time, became artistic director of the Santa Clara Chorale. I always tell people it's substantially my fault now, what is happening. Um, and uh, and it's been really a great journey to be able to be with these two organizations over this longer period of time. Um, Really exciting to come back and revisit a program that we did 10 years ago, around the 100th anniversary of the Christmas Truce. And to be able to take a new fresh look at it, which has been really, really exciting. And we have some singers who were back there with me 10 years ago and some others who are new to it. And so we get a lot of fresh eyes on some old material, and then we also have some new material for the old tired eyes like mine. So it's been really a great process. We could talk more about that in a little bit, I think.
Great, thank you, Scott. Jeff.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff, and I teach at Santa Clara University as well. And I started teaching there in 2014. No, I'm sorry. It's been 14 years. I started in 2011. And I teach directing, acting, musical theater. And Scott and I have collaborated on a few things while we've both been at Santa Clara together, which has been great. So this is kind of a natural, continuation of that. So that's always fun. Um, and I also went to Santa Clara University from a long time ago, so I've had a long association with the university. I also, before coming back to Santa Clara to teach, I spent some time in Paris, France, lived there for about 10 years. And I was thinking about how that kind of informed a little bit of my writing of Truce, a bit, having lived in Europe for a while. And also I've been working with City Lights even before I started teaching at Santa Clara. I think my first play that I worked with City Lights was in 2007 or so. So I've directed there quite a bit and acted there every once in a while. So yeah. So anyway, and also just to be clear, I am the co-author of Truce, A Christmas Wish from the Great War. And so I also want to shout out my co-writer who's not with us today, Kit Wilder. If you're a longtime City Lights person or even a Bay Area theater person, you know Kit. And so he and I were commissioned by City Lights over 10 years ago now. 2012, 2013, we were commissioned to write this play for the theater to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the Christmas Truce. And they produced it 10 years ago, and now they've brought it back in a whole new production of it, new actors, new staging, same play. So it's got a lot of, familiarity, and yet it's brand new in many ways. So it's been exciting to watch that.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, so as both of you mentioned, the both of our truce projects began 10 years ago for the centennial commemoration of the Christmas Truce, and of course, Christmas Truce was happened during World War I. And now, 10 years later, both of our organizations are reviving our projects together, which is really exciting. And we've kind of we've been working together on some exciting cross promotion efforts as well, which has been really fun to do. So talk to me, and Scott or Jeff can jump in first. Just talk to me about your relationship with this story and how it evolved, and what your inspiration was to define your respective projects. Don't jump all at once.
Well, I referred to it a little bit, so I'll just kind of jump in. I mean, I've always been a little bit of a history buff, and I can't exactly say where my fascination with World War I began, but I've always been interested in it. And as I said, we were commissioned to write the play, and Kit, as well as is even more of a history buff than I am, and so we had a common interest in the material. Also, as I said, I lived in Paris for a while, and while I was living there, I did get to go to some of the World War I trenches, which are still there in like Dijon, Verdun, that area, Alsace, the regions over there, and it was really interesting. I just found it very fascinating. I also took part in a film when I was living in Paris. Called Joyeux Noël, which was actually about the Christmas truce as well. And I believe, I'm trying to remember, I think it actually may have even won an Academy Award for Best Foreign Film or something along those lines. I had a very small part in it, mind you, so it's nothing to write home about. But I was around the production a little bit, and so that also kind of piqued my interest as well. So when City Lights wanted this play written, they approached Kit. Kit approached me, and it was really fascinating to jump into, because I mean, I've always, as I say, I've always kind of liked to use history as in a lot of the things I've written, I've liked to use history as a jumping off point, because the truth is stranger than fiction, or more fascinating than fiction, I find. And so we really looked at them, a lot of the original letters of the soldiers home that they wrote home, and some of the people from home writing to the soldiers. We used a lot of source material in writing the play. And really their stories were more interesting in a way than any of the stories we could come up with. But we packaged it all together in a nice, tight play that I think keeps the audience on its toes, in a good way. So it's just been one of those things that that the more I learned about it, the more I wanted to know. And so it was really fun to see this whole project come together now 10 years ago.
And through your researching, did anything surprise, like what was there a letter that surprised you and kind of made you like turn a new direction when you were conceiving of this play? Or
Well, I'd have to remember back to 12 years ago or 11 years ago when we were writing the play. Oh, I'm sure there were things. I mean, I don't know that I have anything specific about it, but as we were looking at it, I was very fascinated by the fact that there wasn't just like one truce, one spot, that it was widespread, and that it had, and actually there's evidence that there were even months before, or not months before, but a few weeks before Christmas, that they were starting to do this in different places, and that it continued, obviously on Christmas. Some of them continued, some of the truces continued into like even New Year's Day. So I thought that was really, really fascinating. And of course, when you look into the history of World War I, just everything was so interconnected in terms of the alliances and things that caused the whole conflict in the first place, or helped cause the conflicts in the first place. So I think kind of what we try to do in the play is I mean, it was interesting when we learned all these different facts about it, and we tried to, put it together in a way that's like it's kind of a pastiche of World War I, even though we focus on four specific characters and their connection to the war. I think it gives a broad overview of really what was going on at the time. So I'd say the more it was hard for us to keep stuff out of the play. We found so much stuff that we wanted to put in. It's like, no, wait, we can't do that. That's, we got to keep it tight, and we can't, this is not going to be a 3-day play. It has to be a 90-minute to 2-hour play, which is what we ended up with. I'm sure it was similar for you, Scott, in terms of not like wanting to include a lot of material. So, yeah, what maybe what was your connection to the material?
Well, yeah, I mean, the letters were really key, I think, in terms of my approach to programming the concert as well. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that I think I tend to try to think about programming a choral concert as a sort of amorphous form sometimes of storytelling. Um, Singing texted music, especially, which choirs do, there's stories to tell in the text, and I think that kind of quality of communication that you can have with the audience because of singing music that's attached to text is really powerful. And so I like to think about programming a concert, even if it's not as thematically linked of a concert, that there's storytelling and dramatic aspects to the way that you put together a concert. And so that's always been a concern of mine in terms of the way that I think about putting together any program. But I think particularly when you think about like putting together a holiday program, because I don't know if I knew this when I became a choral conductor, but you do a lot of holiday concerts. And because that folks love holiday concerts, and it's wonderful. Um, but programming a bunch of them over the course of your career and keeping them fresh and interesting, I think can sometimes be a challenge. And so I try to come up with creative approaches to how do you build a concert that deals with the themes that you might encounter around the holidays. And for me, a touch point for a pretty standard choral concert that was something I grew up Episcopal, and our Episcopal church would always do a lessons and carols service in Advent, where you have readings paired with carols and you go back and forth. And I think that's a really amazing storytelling structure. Um, but I thought about, well, what are other ways we could use that structure to create a narrative concert? And this story was just so compelling and so connected to the carol repertoire that it really made sense to use as sort of the basis for the way that we built a concert. And so in our performances on the 13th and the 15th, we're going to be pairing singing of carols with reading of soldiers' letters and going back and forth so that you hear the story in song, and you also hear the story in the words of the folks who are actually there. And I think that just creates an incredible connection to the material. You're able to experience it in such a deeper way. There's amazing documentaries and there's great films, and there's wonderful books about the event, but hearing that actually come to life in music alongside the retelling of the soldiers' words, I think is just a really touching and powerful structure. And so, but yeah, I mean, it was completely overwhelming how many letters there are, and like how many different things we could draw from. So I think ultimately, I had to sort of think about like, what is the structure that's going to make sense for a choral concert that is going to be of a tolerable length, right? Because it could similarly have ballooned into, we have 3.5 hours of music and letters, and that's not something most folks are going to sit through. So, you know, the way that we ended up structuring it was we start off with sort of a picture of the English front, and singing some of the carols that we know were sung by English forces, and hearing some of their letters. And then we jump to the German front and we hear some of their songs and their letters. And that gets us to intermission. And then, you know, I think the thing that is fun about doing a kind of program like this is similar to creating a play around this topic, is in that there's the story of history that exists, but then there's the story that you actually cast the audience eye and focus on, in terms of how do we tell a story within that context, right? You can't tell the entire history of the event in one play or in one concert. And so we also can think a little bit more broadly and thematically. So the start of the second half is really about how we were still in a state of war at this truce, and what is that reality alongside this beautiful act of understanding of common humanity look like. So there's a set, when you come back from intermission, of a setting of the Flanders Fields poem, and then we do a version of the Coventry Carol, which is about the slaughter of the innocents when Herod feared of the coming of Jesus. And so just killed a whole bunch of kids to be safe. And then we transitioned to this amazing piece that actually wasn't there as a part of our truce 10 years ago, but is a new substitution that we've done, which is a piece by Anne Kilstoff, and it sets a poem that was written by a World War I poet who was an American, named Joyce Kilmer. He entered the war in 1917 and then was killed by a sniper in 1918. And he wrote this text called A Soldier's Prayer, Prayer of a Soldier in France. The title of the piece is A Soldier's Prayer. And this text talks about sort of a comparison of the life of a soldier and the suffering of Jesus as he carries his cross to be crucified. And then Anne Kilstoff sets that alongside this Latin text, which is the Stabat Mater, which describes the mourning and weeping of Mary at the cross, at the crucifixion of her son. And so to put those two things side by side, you get this juxtaposition and then an immediate relation of how this loss of the children of war and what that incredible sacrifice and toll was. And you know, one of the readings that we do, you know, not to spoil, but you all are here for the special stuff, so I feel like I can tell you a couple of things, right? Is in one of the readings that we do at this point in the concert, is a description of sort of the end of the truce. Because there's all these wonderful descriptions about the beautiful singing and the way that soldiers exchanged various different things across the lines, how they played soccer, you know, this real show of like we're humans together. But then this later description says, this turned out to be another day of peace. About 10 a.m., some more German troops came forward, 2 or 3 lots, and I honestly think they wanted to surrender. They came up within hearing distance and kept shouting, "Me come with you," but our officers sent them all back. We played a straight game with them, and they did the same with us. I thought at the time, if only Kaiser Bill and the other big chiefs could only agree the same as Tommy Atkins and the German soldiers, we could soon have peace all the world over. The alarm went up about midnight, and we stood up till daybreak, when we found that our pals of the previous 2 days had tried to rush our position. But they got cut up as usual, and the next morning the ground where we had been so chummy and where Germans had wished us a Merry Christmas was now covered with their dead. And so that reality of sort of the geopolitical power of war to sort of overcome the individual humanity of the person is a thing that we wrestle with in this concert. And it's not something that we always wrestle with in a normal holiday concert. And but I tell my students at Santa Clara, I always put a lot of music about light and dark in our holiday concert. And I think that's because the holidays are often joyful times for a lot of people, but they're also very complicated and challenging times for many of us. And to only see it in one light, to have a holly jolly Christmas only, is not really a accurate portrayal of the experience of most people. And so I think we exist in a complex world where we wrestle with complex emotions and challenges and contradictions. And so if we don't put that into the art that we express, it's hard for us to find ways to cope with that reality. And I think that's one of the powers and the benefits of art, and certainly was like a thing that I was really excited about the power of this kind of program to be able to do. So.
Yeah, and that's great, Scott. I wanted to add a couple things to that. I mean, just that the fact that I think your concert and our play kind of equally represents both, man's humanity and inhumanity to each other. Because we do the same thing with Truce. Obviously, there's a lot of the horrors of war, but it's also very hopeful in places as well. And one of the things we did, I know, with the original production, and of course it's continued with this one, we ended up when we first put it together, I think we had one or two Christmas carols, but as we were starting to work on the production, and especially Kit, because he was directing it, added in more and more music into the play, and it just adds such another dimension to have Christmas carols and Christmas music. So it's really, in very many ways, it's really a play with music. And it just adds such another dimension. So kind of in the way you guys maybe went you maybe started with the music and then decided to add in the letters. But I think the between the text and the music together in both of these pieces, I just think it adds so many dimensions for people. The other thing I would throw out is that we're saying about holiday concerts, and how often they're, how people want them. Same thing with theater companies. Is that you got to do most theater companies need to do a holiday show, and quite frankly, Christmas Carol has done a lot. So it's like, what's another Christmas show we can do? And so theater companies are often looking for Christmas shows. So that was another reason, or Christmas themed shows. So that was another reason why City Lights was like, hey, it's going to be the 100-year anniversary of the truce, the Christmas Truce. Can we turn that into a Christmas show and tell this Christmas story? So that's kind of another reason why we got to do this play.
So thank you both. This is already really interesting to chat about. So Scott, you mentioned for the chorale's performances, it's kind of an interplay between the letters, the original source material, mixed in with carols that they would have sung on the front lines, and I should mention that that the letters themselves are going to be performed by members of our community who are veterans, who are public figures. Actually, we have Max Takis, who is in the original production of A City Lights Truce, will be there to perform one or two letters. These kind of folks who are in our communities, and actually, we have some members of Santa Clara University's ROTC program read some of them as well. So probably will be the same age as those soldiers who really experienced it, and the soldiers who did write these letters. So really powerful to experience that. Jeff, I'm curious about the characters that are in Truce. Can you take a moment to kind of describe those? You said 4 main characters of the play.
Yeah. Well, kind of similar to what Scott was saying about kind of looking at both sides of the conflict and both sides of the war. We have on one side we have a German soldier Georg, who's really the central character in the whole thing. And he's a German soldier who obviously is experiencing all the things he's experiencing on the front, but he ends up in an army hospital. So we meet this nurse, this German nurse, and they have strike up a friendship and a bit of a romance, and so there's some interesting things going on there. But they're also on the other side of the war. We have two characters. One is a British soldier, Tommy, who is really, I mean, he's a soldier, but he's really a writer. He's really a poet and a writer, and that's his main, that's really what he wants to do with himself. But he's caught up in this war, and so we meet him, and then we also meet his wife, his young wife. They've been newly married, haven't been married very long, and so those are the four main characters. And there's actually, as you go on, I mean, you discover there is a connection between Tommy and Georg, having known each other prior to the war. So that's kind of an interesting little connection, which I won't spoil any more of it. And then there's all the peripheral characters, the soldiers and the people, and I think it's a nice mix of we see life on the front and some of the amazing things that happened during that time and during the truce, but we also see some of the higher ups in terms of the generals and things like that. But then we also go back home and we see the people back home and how they were affected by the young men being away from them, and how much how much they had to endure as well. So I think there is quite kind of a good mix of, as I say, kind of a pastiche of a lot of different aspects of this conflict. And while we're talking about the original actors in the original production, I see on the call, I don't want to out him, but there is another member of the original cast on this call today. So I'll just say Damien Vega was terrific in the original production. Just if you want the inside scoop, he's a big City Lights actor and has done a lot of stuff since then, and a friend of mine. So I'm glad he's here. So hi, Damien.
Yeah, Damien, thanks so much for joining us. And Jeff, I really appreciate that perspective, and also appreciate that you've kind of brought more and more music into the play, because when we're thinking about experiencing what it might have been like, you kind of music is kind of a universal language in and of itself, and especially Christmas carols and these melodies that have kind of gone across cultures, and it's a way for us to kind of bridge together our humanities. So that's really great. Scott, let me go back to you, and can you kind of talk more about the specific carols that were here? Is it mostly traditional arrangements, or can we expect something a little bit different? I know you mentioned the Soldier's Prayer. Is there another favorite musical selection that you've chosen for this particular
Well, so
event?
yeah, certainly there's a variety of things, and I think we tried to take a lead from obviously looking at the letters, they describe a lot of the very specific carols. So for the most part, we're sticking to carols we know were sung by the troops because they wrote home and said they heard them or sang them. And so they're not always all super well-known carols to us now. So, the concert begins with "Come Let Us All Sweet Carols Sing," which is an English carol that, like, I don't think most Americans know very well, but it's like the perfect text for the beginning of a concert about carols, because we're literally saying, let's sing a bunch of carols. And there's also opportunity in our concert for folks to sing along, because I think that communal singing in America doesn't happen, I think, nearly as much as I wish it did. So I think giving opportunities for that, and I think also, okay, true, Christmas carols are sacred Christian pieces. They certainly function in that form. However, they also form a repertoire that's partly connected to sort of the folk repertoire of songs that people know that also exists sometimes, I think, outside in secular contexts. And I think can be appreciated as songs that also have that element of being a song that people can sing together because it's a tune they grew up with. Like Silent Night, a lot of people know, you know. We don't let the audience sing along with Silent Night, so maybe that was a mistake on my part. But we do "O Come All Ye Faithful," and I think part of the reason for that is because that is the tune that we know both sides sang together. There was a letter that describes volleys of carols going back and forth between the fronts, and then the English started up with "O come all ye faithful," and then the Germans joined in with "Adeste fideles" because they knew it in Latin. And so then they were able to sing the carol together. And I think that's amazing. And so we want to give that kind of opportunity for folks to be able to join in our singing. But also if they're only traditional carol arrangements, you know, that's not as fun as throwing in a little bit of spice. So we have a kind of like really cool and complicated contemporary arrangement of In Dulce Jubilo, which is really cool because it's a song that the English sing that is in Latin and English, but there's also a version of it that's in Latin and German. And so we're doing a version that sets both Latin and German text alongside of each other. So you can sort of even see the interplay there with those two sides. And then a contemporary composition based on While Shepherds Watched Their Flocks. So it's not the carol tune they probably would have sung, but is a really beautiful setting of that text for that carol. So we try to intersperse things. The Silent Night arrangement that we do is kind of an interesting one because I went back and found the original manuscript that Franz Gruber wrote in the late 1800s, and which the story of that carol is beautiful. Basically, that the organ in the church that he worked at was damaged by flooding, and so the poet of that piece came up to Franz and said, "Hey, can you set this text to a new song that we could accompany on guitar for tonight's Christmas Mass?" And then he does. And then later that church is destroyed completely by flooding. And then they built a new church that's the Silent Night Chapel on that space to commemorate where this song was born. And so we use an arrangement that I created that sort of takes that original sound of a simple piano accompaniment and a couple of singers, and then slowly moves us forward in time as we go through the arrangement of Silent Night to sort of a more contemporary kind of version of it, to see how that kind of music connects us to the past, but is also still a current thing for us. I think that with traditional music like this that people have sung for a long time, I think that's one of the really great powers of it, is that you can find the way it connects you back to past events, but is also still creating current memories. And that I think many people will have their own associations with that song, and that brings that into dialogue with the events that we're describing, which is one of the great powers of art. Then everyone has a different experience with it then. We're doing some German carols that non-German speakers may not know very well. So an O du Fröhliche, I know that's everyone's favorite to gather around the Christmas tree and sing together. But I think it's a great opportunity to sort of expose people to other carols that they may not know, but alongside ones that are really, really familiar. And that are connected to the story of the truce for sure.
And if I could just jump in, Scott, you mentioned about that back and forth of the singing of the carols, over the trenches and stuff. One of the visual back and forths that they apparently, according to research that they did, one of the visuals we use and draw on in the show is that putting candles on top of the torches around Christmas time. I mean, on top of the trenches, excuse me, candles on top of the trenches. That, and then both sides would start to do that, and then Christmas trees started appearing with with candles nearby and things like that. So it was all it was a beautiful image in a lot of these places, back and forth, and each side would add to it, each day or each night, as the case may be. And as I say, we draw on that in the production, the original production, and this production as well. I also want to mention that this production is directed by Angie Higgins. Who's a Bay Area director and runs Silicon Valley Shakes, but she's put her own really unique spin on the play, and so it is, in many ways, it does feel like a brand new production of this play. So it's very exciting to see what she's done with it.
What other visual aspects will we expect to see that are fun?
Well, there's a little bit of video in the play, and the light, so a little bit of projections video. The cast is the costumes and the uniforms are very, very historically, as historically accurate as we can get. I think just the staging, how this cast and this director has used the stage and the whole theater, for that matter. They've used the whole theater in a very dynamic way, so that it doesn't. I feel like you don't just. It's not just like, okay, the story's there on stage. If you feel a part of it, and if you've been in City Lights Theater, it's not the largest theater in the world, and it's in a good way. It's very intimate, and you feel a part of the play. And I think this production does a great job of helping us. Yeah, Scott talks about that communal aspect, and this production feels very communal, and I think people will hopefully feel that and leave with a really positive feeling.
Yeah, having seen several City Light productions, it's just a wonderful space to see theater because you feel so connected to the action. There's not really a seat in that house where you don't feel like you're right there. And especially with a piece like this, it's super amazing to get to see that. So I know I'm really looking forward to going back and seeing it again. We had a partnership between City Lights and Santa Clara Chorale 10 years ago. And we've revitalized that partnership along with these productions, which has been so gratifying. I think sometimes nonprofits, especially in the arts, but I think in all sectors, we sometimes feel like we're the little engine that could doing it all on our own. And so it's really beautiful when organizations can come together and see the ways that we can support each other and help drive audience and be able to encourage each other to experience different takes even on the same story. Like I think for both of these productions, seeing both of them will enrich the experience of the other, because they're telling different perspectives on the same story. And so you'll come away with a richer understanding of sort of the events and the way it makes you feel. And we're really excited because for at least 2 evenings of the production, we are going to go do some caroling at City Lights before and after the production. So a few of our singers will be, myself included, will be doing some caroling outside of the venue as folks are coming. Pardon me, as folks are coming in, to sort of set you into the mood of being ready to hear the power of songs to unite people. So, and we're also really grateful to City Lights for making us a nonprofit partner for this production. And so one of the nights we're going to get to come and talk a little bit about the mission of the Santa Clara Chorale, and they've been so generous and wonderful to collaborate with in terms of being able to do this kind of cross promotion. So we want folks to be able to experience more arts, and help drive each other to each other's things. So yeah, that's been really rewarding. I think it's also been really fun for me to think about the fact that 10 years ago we did this collaboration and I didn't know Jeff really yet. And then since then, Jeff and I have done probably too many collaborations together. No, we always want to do more actually, but Jeff and I worked together on several guest artist visits to be able to pull together some productions for the Center for Arts and Humanities and our Sinatra Artist Program. We did a Sondheim recital when he passed away. And then we got to direct and music direct Into the Woods together more recently. And so it's really fun to think about the fact that both of our brains were turned on to the same passion at a time that we didn't really know to talk to each other about it.
Yeah.
And so it's been fun this year to be able to say to Jeff, hey, don't you want to come and talk with me about it at this thing? And for him to be able to say, yeah, come and talk with me about this thing. So we're also doing an Osher Lifelong Learning short course on this later on in the middle of December before the Chorales concerts kick off. And so it's been really fun to revisit this topic through our like now long-term collaborations view. So that's been really great.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like right now it feels like a very natural outgrowth of the other times we've collaborated. And yet we kind of go back in time and look at what we did, yeah, as you say, kind of separately in a way. But now it's much more organic, which is so much fun to revisit.
Yeah, we're incredibly grateful to City Lights Theater Company for this partnership. And yeah, as Scott mentioned, we will be caroling at opening night before and at the after party. There's always an after party on stage at City Lights, so that's going to be really fun. And then yeah, our nonprofit partner night is Saturday, November 30th. So that following Saturday, Scott and I will be back. We'll jump up on stage and talk a little bit about the chorale. And we'll also have caroling there as well. So yeah, just really grateful to City Lights for reviving this partnership.
And I just want to say, I know City Lights is very grateful for the partnership with you guys as well. As we say, anything to get the word out and to to kind of unite our audiences to see more arts and to kind of partake in this beautiful story, these beautiful stories is just great. So I'm really excited we're doing this.
We are too. I'd like to open up the floor for any questions that anyone has. Feel free if you'd like to ask a question to turn your camera on and wave, or use the feature, the raise hand feature, and we'll get your question in. One question that I had while we wait for other questions is or drop a question in the chat if you're feeling a little shy. Um, you know, many wars have happened since World War I, unfortunately, but what kind of why do you think this particular story really stood the test of time and people are continuing to talk about this and build programs and write stories about it? What's the thing that has really stood the test of time about this story?
Well, we said earlier that I think, both of our programs talk about both the humanity and inhumanity of people towards one another. But I do think that the fact that there was so much humanity in the midst of such a difficult time, that people could come together. I mean, it's just a wonderful thought, but it actually happened. And so I think the fact that it's, again, I mentioned earlier, the truth is stranger than fiction, and I think the fact that it's it's a truthful event that showed how much people can come together, how much they really, the soldiers, how much they really didn't want to fight, and how they would have much rather have just, and it's also interesting the circumstances, because this was a few months really after the war started, and we talk about that in the play. Both sides went into the war thinking, oh, it'll be over by Christmas, but at this time they started to realize, no, this is going to go on a while. And I think most of the soldiers just weren't prepared or didn't think that they would, didn't think going in that would happen. So So I think it just shows, it just shows their feeling at the time and their kinship with with one another. And I think that's just it's a story. It's a great story for now because whenever we're talking about not just countries but even divisions in our own country and two sides, and whenever you can come together and come together over something, I think it's a wonderful thing. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's withstood the test of time.
Yeah, and it's interesting to, well, and it's even more powerful to note that the Christmas truce wasn't just happening in like one like specific little area. It was all up and down the Western Front, which is just it gives me goosebumps just to think about the the amount of just the scope of the truce wasn't just happening in one specific area. Um, we have a question in the chat for specifically for Jeff. Thank you, Tom and Jane. How much was this current production informed by the earlier production, and how much was brand new thinking?
Well, it's a little difficult to quantify that. I'll just say that the script is the same. I mean, we maybe tinkered with a few words here and there, a few things, but the script is the same. The actors, I believe, there's one actor, Karen DeHart, who was in the original production, but otherwise everybody else is new. It's got the same set designer, Ron Gaspernetti, but he's made some tweaks. It's similar, but again, not exactly the same. But again, I think whenever you're dealing with a new director who's putting their stamp on it, and I said Angie Higgins is really, and she and the cast, of course, all new actors, or except for one. So I do feel like it feels like it retains enough of the original. And I mean, obviously that's still the same script. It's still the same story. It's still these same characters. But it's different enough because of the new artists that are involved in it. So I think it still packs a good punch and it tells a powerful story, but in a different, a new creative way. So it's really been fun. It's been exciting for me because it was so long ago, and to see it come back to life is really, really fascinating. And as I was watching a rehearsal, and again, I was trying to remember the original production and, well, what did we do here? What did we do here? And in the end, I just kind of gave up and said, wow, this is new and exciting and fun. And yet it still retains the same feelings of the original.
That's great. And yeah, Jeff, I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I unfortunately can't be there on opening night, but I will be there with Scott on the 30th. So really looking forward to it. While I wait for anyone else who has a question, Scott, I think you need to do some explaining about the unicorn that's behind you.
Sure thing. That's it's not related to any kind of truce, but that is Abby, and she is the Santa Clara University choir mascot. She was won from a claw machine on Pier 39 in San Francisco when our chamber singers was on a regional tour, by one of our students, and came back with it to the bus, and we were all like, "Oh my goodness, it's amazing." And we were doing some music by Abby Bettinas at the time, and so we named the unicorn after her. And I will note that unicorn is not soft. It's a very stiff unicorn. It looks like so squishy and like you could just fold it into pieces, but it's incredibly uh, able to withstand your most enthusiastic embrace. So there's also a harp back there and timbales up there. I have many. It's like a Where's Waldo back there. If you're
Oh man. Well, thank you both. And I also encourage everyone, because I know we have some City Lights people and some Santa Clara Chorale people. Along with Truce, we each of our organizations has a great season ahead. So please check out City Lights and Santa Clara Chorale online and see what we're up to. And you know, this has been a really fun way to spend my lunch hour, and I so appreciate the conversation from our two panelists, Scott Hanna-Weir and Jeffrey Bracco. Thank you so much for this insight. It's been incredibly valuable, and I'm really looking forward to these projects coming up.
Thanks so much,
Thanks for
Miles.
having. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, Miles.
And as a reminder, City Lights Theater Company's Truce, A Christmas Wish from the Great War begins this Thursday and runs through December 22nd. And Santa Clara Chorale's The Christmas Truce concerts are December 13th and 15th. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be posting a recording of this conversation within the next few days on our social media, so definitely look out for that soon. Scott and Jeff, thanks again. Have a great rest of your week, everyone, and happy Thanksgiving.